to mind when I say the word feminism?
When I hear the word feminism, my goodness. Oh fuck.
When I hear the word feminism, I often think of equality beyond both sexes.
When I think of feminism, I think of suffragettes and just a lot of history, and recent history as well, of females just trying to get equality for themselves, and not just equality but also equity.
Feminism to me means equal opportunities, equal rights for men and women.
The idea and the ethos behind feminism, I guess, was working towards equality. It's interesting because in some ways, in the last probably 10 years, feminism's taken a bit of a hard rap.
I know it has been tarnished a lot. It's kind of coming back into fashion again now. Like, young people aren't ashamed to say that they're a feminist, but when I was in my 20s, it was a barren wasteland. Like, you say you're a feminist and watch the room clear.
It's like the word feminism is a scary sort of word, and people often think it means, you know, hate all men, woman reign superior.
But it got a bit skewed. I think there was maybe a bit of a pendulum motion where it kind of, or the opinion of general public thought that feminism went a bit too far. I don't think it did, but maybe what we see now is that it's swinging back into a great position where things are going to be equal.
It's rising again, and it makes me very excited. So I feel excited about feminism now. It has had a terrible time at times reputation-wise, but I am adamant. I'm a proud fist-waving femo from way back.
When I think about men's rights, I often think about sort of that toxic masculinity and how men are often ridiculed sort of if they dress more feminine. I think men's rights is important, yes. As we've seen, you know, suicide rates, like, they're so much higher for guys, and it's not as socially acceptable to show emotions as a guy.
Men's rights it falls into muddy water, I reckon, because some men think of men's rights as being their right to carry on the way they have been. I mean, everything comes back to equality for me. That for me, men's rights is, their right to the same support and their right to the same liberties that everybody should have.
When I think of men's rights, the reason feminism exists is because men have the power. We live in a patriarchy. So I think men's rights are really very well represented. So the reason feminism comes into play is because women feel they aren't being represented and they haven't been represented. If the person that says to you, well, what about men's rights, doesn't represent men's rights in any other way except for when they argue with a feminist, I don't give a shit what they say. I shut them down, don't listen.
I definitely think of particularly white males who feel disadvantaged by feminism, whether that has to do with a loss of control or a feeling like they're being targeted. And sometimes I feel like they probably think they're forgotten. Males have always had just historically more rights.
Toxic masculinity, to me, it's another gender role. For example, like the demure woman.
So the masculinity that goes beyond equality. So the masculinity that takes away people's rights.
I think of, especially in Australia, there's this strange culture of having to be, tough, not letting your emotions get to you, being strong, physically strong.
Toxic masculinity is a man that believes he can't share his emotions, they can't communicate with one another. The only emotion they're allowed to show is anger. And it's described as toxic because it's very harmful. It can cause rape culture, it can cause people to normalise rape.
Generally giving off the image like you're in charge. Yeah, makes me uncomfortable.
Toxic masculinity to me is standard for men to be masculine and be one of the boys, or go fishing, and just all of those very stereotypical things that society has said that men should do or be.
It took me a while to realise why people got so defensive about toxic masculinity when I've heard it, and it's because I think men think that we're saying masculinity is toxic. What they don't understand is it's a certain type of masculinity. Yeah, it's as harmful for men as it is for women, without a doubt.
Toxic masculinity is like suppressing guys who want to wear makeup or dress in more feminine clothing and are more sensitive, which is so not okay, because I wish guys could just express themselves a bit more without being worried about what other people will say or think or do. Our society's become more progressive with trying to eliminate that toxic masculinity, but is very much present in your day-to-day life, especially at high school. Well, when our friends that are guys aren't as comfortable around other guys because they feel like they might be treated differently because they're not this common stereotype of being a man, like they like to dance or they like to do this, which is like perfectly normal. I have seen toxic masculinity everywhere. Everywhere.
Oh, it was around me, like, thousand examples. Telling women that they're too ugly to rape. As a child being sexualized, as a young girl at 12 or whatever, getting wolf whistled at, being followed home, and just weird things like that, that as a woman you internalize and accept as what it is like to be in the world, until you mention it to someone who's never encountered anything like that, and that's a man. I think that's toxic masculinity. That's a good example of it. The men around you would always get upset because they'd say, oh, it's not you that's going to get punched in the face. It's like, yeah, but it's me that it's happening to. It's something that I discovered men aren't really aware of, is that when a woman exists in a space, it's as if she belongs to the men in the space.
Just toxic masculinity fucking sucks.
Do you believe there was or is a war between the sexes?
A war.
A war? Ooh. Oh, bring it on, bitches.
Yes, I believe that there is definitely a war between the sexes, which is kind of sad because I wish we all kind of just linked arms and went through it together, like, you know, peace, love. But yeah, even in primary school.
I'd like to think there's not, because there definitely are, you know, males out there who hate females, and there's definitely females out there who hate males, but that's not to say that all of those sexes are the same. And then, I mean, the other sexes can't go forgotten either, to say that there's a war between them. I don't think so. I don't think that's how I would describe it.
I don't think there's a war between the sexes. I don't think, not that I wish for there to be a war, but I wish there was more debate. I wish there was more conversation about it, because that would lead to change. I think the only way for the sexes to be united, genders, is for women to have equal seats at the table, at all tables. Women need it to be equally represented. So do minorities. Well, and then voices get heard, voices get represented, and then we have a more reflective society. When people say they want to have women represented at the table, and people often say, oh, but shouldn't it be based on merit? If we were to have quotas, that it wouldn't be. But I always think that's kind of insulting, because that means the only people who have earned a seat at the table all look the same, all white hair. That's ludicrous. Donald Trump is the president of the free world. You can't tell me that's based on merit.
We want to be equal, right? And I don't want to be treated differently just because I'm a female, but a lot of guys often take that as an insult, especially if I try and talk to them about it. Like, they'll think that I'm attacking them, or I think that all guys are bad, and I don't want to fight about it. I just want to, like, educate.
When people say, well, what about men's rights? Whenever I've raised feminist issues, and someone always, and I said, well, how about you fight the men's rights, I'll fight the women's rights, and together we will save the world.